I'm Adrienne, y'all, and today I want to share my endometriosis story. I've been thinking about doing this video for a while, but I had some reservations just because it can be a very private matter, and a lot of people are not really aware of exactly what endometriosis is. So I do want to touch on what endometriosis is, and I'm not going to go really in depth with it, but endometriosis is a chronic condition, and basically what happens is parts of the endometrium, which is the inner lining of the uterus, are found outside of the uterus, and it can cause adhesions and scar tissue. And what happens is women generally have heavy periods, really painful periods, even chronic pelvic pain. Some women experience pain when they're not on their periods. They have pain all the time. So it can be a very debilitating condition for some women. Fortunately, I only had issues while I was actually on my periods each month. So that was about 3 to 4 days out of the month that I did have to suffer through that. But there are women out here who are dealing with it every single day. There's constantly being research done on it. There's a lot of theories out there as far as the cause. It's just really, there's no definitive answer as to why. So it's just something that women a lot of times have to suffer through, and they don't have a lot of answers for you as far as how to fix it or make it better beyond surgery or hormones that can have their own additional side effects. And prior to my surgery, I did rely heavily on YouTube videos and blogs and all that information to kind of guide my process and to just have insight into what I would be encountering or what I would encounter in the future. So just as a disclaimer, I will be using the words period, ovaries, cervix, uterus, fallopian tubes, so if those words make you squeamish, by all means, just go ahead and exit right now. But anyway, so I'll kind of start from the beginning with my situation. And basically, I started my period at 10 years old. Everything was fine. About 1 year later, I started having cramping. And basically, my stomach was just kind of aching. And I told my mom, and she's like, "Oh, are you on your period?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, okay, it's probably cramps, whatever." So, as time progressed, I would have painful periods. My mom experienced that, so she's like, "Of course, I know what you're going through." We did talk to my pediatrician about it, and at one point I did receive a prescription for Anaprox, which is naproxen sodium, and it's just a higher dosage of Aleve that you can get, via prescription. So time went on. As I'm thinking back, there were a few periods that were just like more intense than others, but they were kind of just here and there, so it wasn't a big issue. So January 1st of 2015, I got home very early that morning as I had been out the night before, and I noticed I was having some stomach pains, and I did vomit, and then I also noticed that my period was on. So though I had been out, I had 2 drinks, so I knew that it wasn't like a you had too much to drink type throwing up situation. So I then the day went on, and the pain just got really intense, and I just couldn't handle it anymore, and I went into the ER about 7 p.m. that day. And then of course, you go into the ER, the first thing they're going to look for, they want to rule out pelvic infections, they want to rule out sexually transmitted diseases, pregnancy, all that stuff. So they did all that testing. I got an ultrasound, CT scan, all that stuff. Basically, we don't see anything wrong. They did give me morphine, and that definitely like knocked the pain out right away, which I was happy about. And then, I went on home, and I didn't leave until 7 a.m. the following morning. So I was there for 12 hours. So I went home, period went on the remainder of that week. The pain just kind of dwindled off, and it was okay. So they did, of course, recommend I go and see my gynecologist, and I did. And she said, your symptoms seem like it could be something like endometriosis, in which the first line treatment that we would give you would be oral birth control pills. So she's like, let's just go ahead and start you on those and see if there's any improvement. So I went ahead and started on those. I have been on pills for years prior to this, but I had come off of them for about 1 year as I was having night sweats and just some unwanted side effects. And so she put me on a different pill, and things were better as far as the side effects were concerned, but I still was having the painful periods. So the pain that I was having, just to describe it, is it felt like someone was pulling my belly button from the inside, like pulling at my belly button. Sharp pain. And then it was almost like a churning or like a spasming. So it's like it would squeeze really, really, really tight, let go for like 1 second, squeeze, let go. And it would do this constantly for those 3 days. This is constant. No break, no relief whatsoever. So sometimes I would have that pulling sensation at the belly button during times when I was not on my period. So I was like, okay, maybe this is more of, a GI thing. So I went to a GI specialist, and they gave me something called Bentil, which is just like a muscle relaxer for the gut, essentially. And that didn't help, of course. So, I powered through it for a little bit. I was working PRN on my job at that time, and I was in grad school. So I was kind of able to manipulate my schedule a little bit, because previously I was having to call in, when I would have these painful periods. And so just to go more in depth with what I was experiencing, the pain would just be so excruciating. I couldn't really turn from side to side in bed without a lot of pain. I could not lay flat on my back. I would have to sleep like propped up on pillows. I couldn't eat for those few days. It seemed like eating would make the pain worse, and that's kind of why I was thinking it could be a stomach issue. I would vomit during that time, even though I hadn't eaten anything. I would try to get down some Gatorade or chicken broth or soup or something, but nothing would help whatsoever. It was just terrible, and my stomach would be kind of swollen, tender to the touch. It was even hard to just ride in the car because every little bump, it would just cause me so much pain. And so I ended up going back to the gynecologist, and I actually saw a different doctor because my personal doctor was out on maternity leave, and she was like, why don't you go ahead and take the birth control pills continuously? So if you haven't been on birth control pills before, typically you have 3 weeks of hormonal pills, and then the 4th week doesn't have any hormones, and you have your period that week. So what I was going to be doing now is skipping that sugar pill week and just starting a new pack of pills after that 3rd week. So basically I'm only taking hormonal pills, and that will stop or delay your periods. So I did that for a while because I was finishing up grad school. I was going to be getting a full-time job, and I had just had a lot going on. I was like, okay, let's just take the pills continuously and go on. And I had looked into a particular, like a specialty center in Atlanta. It's called Center for Endometriosis Care. And, I just kind of briefly looked on their website and whatnot, in passing. So now fast forward like a year and a half, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure. So with high blood pressure, it is not recommended that you take birth control pills or any method of birth control that contains the hormone estrogen. So the pills that I was on and the pills that, they recommended for me did contain estrogen. But, at this point, I could not stop the pills because I just felt like I would rather die than have another period than feel that pain. It was that bad. And, I just started taking my blood pressure medication and I continued with the pills. So I was like, I really need to go ahead and do something about this. For those who don't know much about endometriosis, they can definitely diagnose you based on symptoms. However, you, in order to have a, definitive diagnosis would be through surgery where they actually visualize the adhesions or the scar tissue or the endometrial implants. So I did go ahead and send in my information to the Center for Endometriosis Care, and the surgical team there is just wonderful. They reviewed my medical records and my medical history and decided that it would be best for me to have laparoscopic surgery. So that's what I did. And they called me. They said, let's go ahead and get that scheduled. Based on your symptoms, it sounds like you could have endometriosis. So, I went in. My surgery was on April 13th of 2017. So, part of the reason why I'm doing this video is basically I'm right at a year since my surgery. So, when I went in for the pre-op appointment, he let me know these are the things that we have that they go ahead and list all the procedures that they could possibly have to do so they don't have to get consent in the middle of the surgery. You've already consented to, if this needs to be done, we can do it. So, they had seen some fibroids on ultrasound they wanted to remove. My appendix they wanted to remove because they said sometimes your appendix can have scar tissue on it, and possible bowel resection, and of course removal of the endometrial adhesions. So with the bowel resection, it was kind of just like if worst case scenario, we would have to remove a portion of the bowel, whatever. So, I was like, okay. So, went in, everything was smooth. As I was coming to after the anesthesia, of course, I found out I did have to have a bowel resection. And, I was very upset at that moment. Originally, they had said, this is just kind of not really an inpatient thing, but you'll stay here for about 24 hours to be observed after the surgery and then you can go. But because of the bowel resection, I did have to stay in the hospital for several days. And basically, I had to kind of advance my diet slowly with kind of just clear liquid. Then they let me go to a soft diet, then a bland diet. I had to stay on that for several weeks after the surgery. Just to let the gut heal. So basically, just to explain the bowel resection, they had to remove a portion of my bowel. So what they did discover in the surgery is that my left fallopian tube and ovary were basically twisted and kind of scarred down. The back of my uterus was stuck to a portion of my bowel due to the adhesion. So that's the portion of the bowel that they did have to remove. And then they did remove fibroids. They did do a procedure to basically where they inject dye into the tubes just to make sure everything's open and patent, and it was. And they also inserted a Mirena IUD at that time. So after the surgery, I did stay in the hospital for several days, but everything was fine. They made sure my pain was under control. I never did have a lot of pain. I stayed in the hospital, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 days. I went in on a Thursday, and I think I left on that Monday, maybe. So once I got home, it was a bit rough that first week, and I think it's just the emotional part of it. not only coming down from anesthesia, I think that just plays with your emotions as well, but just with the diagnosis, endometriosis is a chronic condition, and it does potentially cause infertility for some women. And so, I've never tried to have children at this point, but that's always in the back of your mind, like, will that be a hindrance? Will that get in the way of me having children in the future? So, of course, that's a concern. But like I said, I didn't really struggle with pain that much. After a week, I did go home with my mom. She actually came with me to Atlanta, and then I went back home after a week and just kind of stayed at home. They did want me to remain off work for 6 to 8 weeks, but I just could not do that. So I did go back to work after 3 weeks, but I was fine. Mostly I was just tired just from kind of being, up and out and about for 8 hours. Not necessarily, I don't have a job that's really strenuous. So, it wasn't that big of an issue. But overall, I am very glad that I did have the surgery, because now I know what was going on, and I know that it is, I don't want to say it's fixed, but I definitely feel better. Of course, there's a certain percentage, I'm not sure exactly, but there's a certain percentage of people who do have recurrence with it even after the surgical removal of those adhesions. So I'm just praying that will not be the case for myself. But with the Mirena IUD, I've had good experience. I did have spotting the first 3 to 4 months, but after that, it's been fine. I do have periods every month, but they're very light, pretty short. Cramping is very minimal. If I have any cramping, it's just like, I take a naproxen or ibuprofen, and I don't feel anything after that. So the cramping is very minimal, so that's really good. So everything's going well. So I just hope that this can help someone else. And, I see a lot of women just on various platforms, various sites where women are weighing in about menstrual cramping. And a lot of women speak about how they have just horrible experiences with their cramps. And I just want women to know that that's not normal. Of course, a little bit of cramping is normal. Something that you can take an ibuprofen, a Tylenol, a Midol, and everything's fine going about your day. But if you're missing school, you're missing work, you're vomiting, you can't get out of bed for several days, that's not normal. And at the very least, it does warrant further evaluation, from a medical professional. But, I think a lot of times as women, even other women, because I've had older women say it to me, it's just like, oh, it's just a part of life, whatever. You have cramps, get over it, this and that. But I'm sorry, if you're having pain that excruciating, it's nothing to get over. And if you feel that your provider is not taking you seriously, if you do have concerns, then I would see someone else, because you do have a right to be treated by someone who values, your experience and what you're going through, and it looks for ways to assist you. So that's all I'm going to say. It's a lot that goes on, so I just kind of gave a summary of everything that happened. But if you have any questions, feel free to inbox me. Feel free to comment and let me know. But yeah,